one, Mr. Jim Molyneux. Callaghan!
Number one, sir.
Mr. Speaker, sir, this morning I presided at a meeting of the Cabinet and had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall be having further meetings later today.
Callaghan.
Is the Prime Minister aware that the Select Committee on Education's report on teacher shortages, pay and conditions has been suppressed for almost a year? As this report is to be published after the local elections, will the Prime Minister tell the House what she and her Conservative colleagues on the Select Committee, would she tell the House, what are you afraid of?
Mr. Speaker, we're very proud of our record with regard to teachers' pay compared with that of the previous Labour Party. By the 1st of January 1991, teachers' pay will have risen by 50% on average in cash terms since March 1986. My Right Honourable the Secretary of State for Education and Science is implementing the Interim Advisory Committee's recommendations. This will mean very substantial rises for all teachers, particularly experienced teachers and those new to the profession. Heads and deputies will receive increases of up to 12.2%. It's a good record.
Mr. Rob Hayward.
Speaker, my right honourable friend will have seen representations over the last 12 months on alternatives for the community charge. Was not the most callous unveiled yesterday in Scotland, where there was a proposal for no rebates to pensioners, no rebates for the sick, no rebate for the unemployed, and that proposal was outlined by the Right Honourable Member for Glasgow Garskaden yesterday.
Mr. Speaker,
Order.
my honourable friend makes it...
Order. Well, I'm not responsible for what the honourable member says. It's a matter for him, the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend makes his own point very effectively.
Order. Just disgraceful behaviour. Prime Minister.
The policy of the opposition, which I would criticise, is the policy of the roof tax, which would bear particularly heavily on all of those in council houses who, having purchased their house at a very generous discount, would find themselves with a very high actual charge, roof tax, on the up-to-date valuation of that house.
Mr. Molyneux. James Molyneux.
Is the Prime Minister aware that whatever may be said by politicians in Europe, including some in this House who want to know better, there is widespread support throughout the United Kingdom for her defence of Britain's status as a nation-state in all respects?
Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful for the Right Honourable Gentleman's question. I agree with him that I think most people wish to be absolutely certain they will continue to have their own head of state or monarchy, as half of us are monarchies in Europe, their own parliamentary institutions and their own other institutions, and that we should be accountable to them.
Mr. John Townend.
Is my right honourable friend aware of the growing anger amongst the general public at the enormous cost of the recent prison riots, which will have to be paid by the taxpayer? And can she assure this House that this will not be allowed to happen again, and in any future incidents, control of the prisons will be retaken immediately, and whatever force is necessary will be used, whether it be the SAS, tear gas or arms, and that the government will not be deterred by fear of injuring convicts?
Mr. Speaker, with regard to the matter of cost, that will be discussed with my Right Honourable friend, the Home Secretary, although it's normally expected that the police meet themselves from their grants the costs of ordinary policing. That will be further discussed with my Right Honourable friend, the Home Secretary. With regard to the timing of what happened, I think it's right that the decision should be left to those on the spot in conjunction with consultation with the Home Office, and I don't think it's for us to second-guess the decisions that were made.
Tam DL.
Number 2, sir.
Mr. Speaker, sir, civil servants in my private office observe the same guidelines as other civil servants.
Tam DL.
In that case, what are the facts of Mr. Poe going to see Mr. Black about the position of Mr. Hastings? Yes. Is it quite proper that a civil servant should go to see a newspaper proprietor about the position of an editor?
Mr. Speaker, I would not accept all that the honourable gentleman says or his interpretation of it. Civil servants in my private office have served government of both political complexions with great efficiency and conscientiousness and professionalism. That is a great strength of our system, and it's understood that we do not normally attack people in this House where they cannot answer back. I am certain that they will continue to carry out their duties in the highest spirit of conscientiousness and professionalism.
Sir Rupert Allison.
My right honourable friend will be aware that Mr. Dennis Payne, who recently conducted an investigation into leaks from Downing Street, has given a very lengthy interview to Thames Television for broadcast this evening, which is being considered by the IBA. But does she consider that this is appropriate? And furthermore, would she give serious consideration to the IBA banning this broadcast on the grounds that Mr. Dennis Payne had not been given permission to make these disclosures?
Mr. Speaker, if any people have given interviews to a television as civil servants, they have cleared it with the Cabinet Secretary, who is head of the Civil Service. Matters for the IBA are not for me to reply, but for them.
John Garrett.
The government redefined the duty of a civil servant. The duty and loyalty of a civil servant has always been to the Crown. And now the head of the Civil Service has announced that the duty and loyalty of a civil servant is to the government. What fear or ambition has led the Honourable Lady to approve this constitutional change?
The Honourable Gentleman is not correct. The duties under the previous Cabinet Secretary were reissued, and they were reissued in very substantially the same form as previously, as he will find if he goes through them. And the duties are, of course, to the state, and that does mean that they have to serve the government of the day.
Nicholas Soames.
3, sir. Nature of the Prime Minister's reply, I'd hope to raise this on the agenda.
Nicholas Soames. Number 3, sir.
I refer my honourable friend to the reply which I gave some moments ago.
Soames.
Mr. Speaker, sir, may I return my right honourable friend to the mutiny at Strangeways Prison? Having regard to the earlier answer that my right honourable friend gave, is she aware that there is a very significant body of public opinion in this country which cannot understand why the liberation, why the recapture of these prisoners should have been allowed to take such a very long time? And will my right honourable friend reassure this House again that whatever equipment the prison service say that they need to control riots in prison, they will get?
Mr. Speaker, if we return for a moment to the subject of the Strangeways riots, I did say previously that I thought that we couldn't second-guess the decision of those on the spot in consultation with the Home Office, and I think it would be a mistake in hindsight for us each to express our own views, not having been on the spot at the time. I'm glad, as my honourable friend is, and my right honourable friend, that the disturbances are ended, and my right honourable and learned friend, the Home Secretary, will be making a full statement on those disturbances immediately after questions. In the meantime, the Home Office have, within the last few days, placed orders for an extra £750,000 worth of equipment and clothing for the personal protection of officers who may have to deal with prison disturbances. My right honourable friend will be giving further details later.
Neil Kinnock.
Mr. Speaker, in view of yesterday's further evidence of the appalling balance of payments position, What changes is the Prime Minister going to make in her economic policies?
We have no changes to make in our economic policies. We hope we shall get support, in view of the Right Honourable question from him, in trying to keep down unit labour costs, and we hope, therefore, that he will not support every increase in pay that is unrelated to productivity.
Speaker, I remember when the Prime Minister used to think that unit labour costs were a matter of market movement and not something to do with politicians. The Prime Minister realise that Britain now has the highest inflation and the lowest growth rate of any of the major industrialised countries. Does she know that it is now 3 years since we last had a monthly balance of payments surplus? Is she willing to recognise that no government has ever had it so wrong for so long? And doesn't she think that she owes it to the country to change from her disastrous policies?
I'm interested that the Right Honourable Gentleman thinks that it's so wrong to have the highest number of jobs in this country that there have ever been in our history, and that is the basis of the people's prosperity. I'm interested that he thinks it's so wrong to have the highest level of capital investment in manufacturing industry and the highest output. We think it is a good basis for the future.
To Bill Walker.
Has my right honourable friend noticed that in the second year of the community charge in Scotland, that local authorities' expenditure programmes are largely within the rate of inflation, and that 20 of them actually have expenditure programmes that are about the same level or below the level of the previous year? Does this not show very clearly that the community charge is working? And more importantly, oh yes it is, and more importantly, those people in Scotland who have paid have little sympathy for those who refuse to pay and can pay, like the Provost of Angus District, who is now using his community charge money to run around in the car which is paid for, which he's not paying for himself.
Mr. Speaker, I think what my honourable friend is indicating is that in the first year of community charge, local authorities try to increase their expenditure and blame it on the community charge instead of upon themselves. In the second year, they cannot do that, and therefore they are perhaps more conscientious in trying to curb their own expenditure. With regard to paying the community charge, the law was passed through this House, and like all law, should be observed by all honourable citizens.
Jimmy Ray.
I refer the honourable gentleman to the reply which I gave some moments ago.
I apologise for an attack on the Scottish people, saying that they were subsidised by the tolerant English, which she also make it quite clear that when implementing the poll tax in Scotland and asking her advisers, the answer she got was yes, yes, yes. Can I tell her from the heartbeat of Glasgow and Scotland, the answer is no, 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 no.
Mr. Speaker, with regard to the practical part of the honourable gentleman's question, as he will be aware, community charge in Scotland meets only 1/5, 20% of local government expenditure. Community charge in England meets 30% of local government expenditure, and we in England would very much like to have the same proportion of grant that Scotland has.
Mr. Barryfield.
And agree with the awful historical statistic that of the 800 Isle of Wight riflemen who were sent to reinforce the beachhead at Gallipoli, only 180 returned without injury. Does my right honourable friend agree that this statistic is the best reason why we should have a strong NATO, supported by an excellent military ally like Turkey, why we should modernise our nuclear deterrence, and a timely reminder of the unity the Commonwealth gives us when we are in adversity?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I agree with my honourable friend. It's particularly noteworthy that when we were celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Gallipoli landing, We were doing so with Turkey as a main ally of this country, and both of us believing staunchly in NATO as giving us a sure defence to see that such things do not happen again in the future.
Business questions.